Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Wonderful. So can you tell us your story and how you realized the power of thinking differently?
It's funny that I used to be the kid that was on the slow bus, and I used to have that stigma. I don't even know why they have the small little buses there where the kids ride on. But I used to be one of those kids that would ride on the small bus and recognize the fact that I was different. And it was quite debilitating, as I had mentioned. It took me a while. I was high school, middle school, I did well. High school, I was in all college, my courses, college prep courses. I went on and got my master's in international business. I went into the workforce and worked for, major corporations, traveled all around the world, literally. But coming out of that whole middle school, I think I was actually in 5th grade, when I took an IQ test. And I remembered it exactly because I remember the fact that, A, I didn't do well for some reason. B, the teacher said, I'm going to give it to you again. And that's what really brought it to my memory, brought it to my consciousness. And C, at that point, I remember taking it. And it wasn't until several years later when I think I was in high school and speaking to a counselor in South Carolina, when the counselor was suggesting vocational schools and everything else, because he said, well, your IQ test showed a score of 90, and therefore these are what we're recommending. Now, mind you, I never had that in my mind. I spent in 5th grade, so why should a marker in 5th grade determine the course of your life when you're, 5 grades later? So I still live with that for much of my career, again, having gone and worked in Europe and South America, and always walking around thinking they're going to find me out to be an imposter. And that was such an anxiety-creating thought to have in my mind continuously. But it wasn't until I started really recognizing the works of Howard Gardner. He's a Harvard University professor. He's written 7, 8, 9 books on what's called multiple intelligences, recognizing the fact that we don't just think in terms of one type of intelligence, the one we're used to, the IQ test, the logical, mathematical. But he actually outlined roughly 9 different types of intelligences that we have. For example, the naturalist is the person who may be living in Borneo or South America in Brazil, and they may be the indigenous people who know the flora, the fauna, know the trees, what's happening around in the environment. They couldn't do well on an IQ test, but they would do massively well with respect to surviving and excelling in their environment. And there are roughly 8 others, for example, musical, spatial, which understands the big space, big picture. Obviously, we have intrapersonal and interpersonal, which means how do we relate to ourselves and how do we relate to others. But when you really start to understand the fact that we don't have to align the way we think with the way they want us to think, with the way establishment wants us to think, then we can really start to clear those boundaries out of our mind, out of our subconscious, and move forward with really what we're good at.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that we can hear a story and it can just stick with us for our whole lives? I mean, how many times, especially as women, that we've been told, oh, well, you're just not good at math or science. And maybe I'm just dating myself when I say that, because I know that that's not really the conversation now and really pushing the STEM for women. But I mean, when I was coming up, it was very much, oh, you're not going to be good at math. I was supposed to be in remedial math classes and get all this supportive help and all these things that have just been ingrained in us and follow us throughout our lives. And it's interesting that you talk about the imposter syndrome. And throughout all of us as humans have this level on some way of, just fear that we're not good enough. To varying degrees, but then you have these stories reinforcing that. And it's just phenomenal. And I wish that people really understood more of what they were saying and the impression that they have, that lasting impression.
Right. And that's key, I think, because as mentioned, I've worked for consulting companies. I used to work for Accenture back in the day. And, the experiences in these organizations, when you recognize the fact that you think differently, not better, not worse, just differently. And I think there used to be a book called From Good to Great, where you may be on the wrong bus or you may be in the wrong seat. I knew I was in the wrong bus with respect to working for Accenture because I didn't think like that. But I really had to find out how I thought and then started to leverage my abilities. And that's when I really started to excel, pulling past or away from that which they wanted, or I'd say the alignment that I thought I should be with, and going to where I really excel with respect to my experiences.
Mm-hmm. And you say that one of your special skills has been in identifying market gaps and opportunities for solutions. So I know that you also have been involved with the sustainability movement and are a board member for one of the first micro-lending nonprofits. Was this an area where you saw a gap, or how did all of that transpire?
I've always been a person who's been creating businesses. And we talked a little bit before the show about the whole question of, I think, the fact that there are so many great ideas that are in the cemetery because people don't have the ability, or for whatever reason, to bring them to fruition, and they die with it. And so I've always been that entrepreneurial type. My father was an entrepreneur, and I always wanted to create my own businesses. But I couldn't get out of my own way. Because of the debilitating belief that I wasn't good enough, I would always sabotage the things that I was involved in. And I would always feel that, well, something's going to break down, and therefore I'd walk away from it, or I'd lose interest in it. I remember one time I was at, I think it was 2008, and we created a concept, my ex-wife and I created this concept. We were having conversations with everyone from the Hartford Insurance Company. We won an award with them. Lincoln Financial. We had a conversation with the VP of Strategic Marketing the same day. I think it was October 15th, 2008. The same day Lehman Brothers folded. And so sitting there having a conversation directly with them about Lehman Brothers, I knew that our $100,000 investment in that business was going nowhere at that point because the markets were shutting down. So that was a business I had to walk away from with a considerable loss in money. And when you go through those different experiences and you're recognizing the fact that you're not making inroads into bringing your ideas to fruition, then you really have to start wondering why. And one of the things I started recognizing, going back to this multiple intelligence, is the fact that I'm very good actually at the mathematical, logical. I'm very good at the existential and at the interpersonal, but I am horrible at the interpersonal. Being able to go out there and have the conversations with the venture capitalists, the angels that are asking for something was something, again, that was debilitating to me. I wasn't able to do that. So here you go. I had everything. I had the ideas. I had developed out business plans beyond belief, but I couldn't move it to the next step, the next level, by getting the actual funding for these ideas. And again, that's where a lot of our ideas just crash and burn. So it's not necessarily what the best ideas are that are coming to the marketplace. It's the ones that are being supported by the capital community.
So I